The great hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with excitement as representatives from dozens of worlds gathered for the first interspecies hunting tournament. The massive chamber stretched for miles, its crystalline walls reflecting the diverse forms of alien life that had come to witness this historic event. In the center, a holographic display showed the deadly moon of Arcturus 7. Where the competition would take place, the Vorthek delegation stood tallest, their crystalline bodies gleaming under the artificial lights. They had brought their most feared predator, a creature made of living crystal that could slice through metal with its razor-sharp limbs. The being stood 12 feet tall and radiated an aura of cold menace that made even other aliens step back. Their ambassador, a towering figure named Korth, spoke in a voice like breaking glass about how their hunter would dominate the competition. Near the aquatic section, the Deltans floated in their portable water chambers, their tentacled forms rippling with psychic energy. Their chosen predator was a nightmare of flesh and mind, capable of reading thoughts and inducing paralyzing fear in its victims. The creature's multiple eyes glowed with malevolent intelligence, and its very presence seemed to whisper dark thoughts into the minds of those who looked upon it too long. The insectoid scrix clicked and buzzed in their corner, their hive-mind assassins moving in perfect synchronization. These creatures resembled giant mantises crossed with spiders, their movements so coordinated that they seemed to be controlled by a single consciousness. Each assassin was equipped with natural weapons that could penetrate most known armor, and their ability to work as a unit made them nearly unstoppable. Other species had brought equally impressive hunters. The rocky Gornax presented a creature that could tunnel through solid stone and emerge anywhere on a battlefield. The gaseous ethereals had somehow contained a living storm that could phase through matter and strike with lightning. The plant-like Verdians brought a predator that could control entire ecosystems and turn the environment itself into a weapon. As each delegation presented their hunter, the crowd roared with approval. Holographic displays showed the creatures' past victories, their kill counts, and their survival rates in various deadly environments. The betting pools grew larger as species placed wagers on their favorites, with most money going to the Vorthek Crystal Warrior and the Dalton Psychic Predator. Then the Earth delegation arrived. The hall fell silent as 3 humans walked through. The main entrance, followed by a small, stocky creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a badger. The humans were unremarkable by galactic standards. Tom was a weathered man in his 50s with calloused hands and keen eyes. Lisa was a younger woman with short brown hair and practical clothing, and David was a quiet man in his 30s who carried a simple backpack and stayed close to the small animal. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before the laughter began. It started with a few chuckles from the Scrix delegation, then spread like wildfire through the chamber. The mighty Vorthek crystalline bodies resonated with sounds like wind chimes in a hurricane. The Deltans' water chambers bubbled with their aquatic mirth. Even the stoic Gornax seemed to rumble with amusement. The laughter grew louder when the humans formally presented their 3 competitors to the tournament officials. Tom stepped forward first, his simple hunting jacket and worn boots drawing more snickers from the crowd. Lisa followed, her survival gear looking primitive compared to the advanced technology displayed by other species. But the real hilarity erupted when David gently led forward the honey badger. The creature weighed maybe 30 pounds and stood barely 2 feet tall. Its black and white fur looked soft and harmless, and it seemed completely uninterested in the enormous predators surrounding it. Instead, it sniffed at the floor and began grooming itself, paying no attention to the hundreds of alien eyes watching it. Ambassador Korth of the Vorthek stepped forward, his crystalline form towering over the human delegation. His voice carried the sound of breaking ice as he spoke through the translation device. This is what Earth sends to compete with the greatest predators in the galaxy, these soft mammals and their pet. The Deltan representative's psychic voice echoed in everyone's minds, dripping with condescension. We expected more from the species that claims to be intelligent. Perhaps they misunderstood the nature of this competition. The Scrix buzzed in their harmonious way, their collective consciousness finding the situation amusing. The small creature appears to be grooming itself. Does it not understand that it is about to enter mortal combat? David remained calm as the mockery continued. He had expected this reaction. He gently patted the honey badger, which looked up at him with small, dark eyes that seemed utterly fearless. The animal showed no sign of stress or concern, despite being surrounded by creatures that could kill it in seconds. The tournament coordinator, a neutral AI construct, projected its voice throughout the hall. The rules of the competition are simple. All hunters will be transported to the surface of Arcturus 7, where they must survive for 7 standard galactic days. Points will be awarded for successful kills, demonstration of hunting skills, adaptation to the hostile environment, and overall survival. The hunter with the highest combined score will be declared the winner. The holographic display showed Arcturus 7 in detail. The moon's surface was a hellscape of toxic swamps, crystalline forests with razor-sharp trees, methane geysers, and creatures that had evolved to be the ultimate survivors. The temperature fluctuated wildly, the atmosphere was barely breathable for most species, and the local wildlife included predators that had wiped out entire ecosystems. The alien representatives looked at the display with satisfaction. Their hunters had been specifically chosen for their ability to thrive in such conditions. The humans looked at the same display with what appeared to be mild concern, though Tom and Lisa seemed to be studying the terrain features with professional interest. The honey badger, for its part, had found something interesting on the floor, and was investigating it with single-minded determination. As the day progressed, the aliens continued their mockery. They made jokes about human fragility, their lack of natural weapons, and their apparent inability to bring proper predators to the competition. The betting pools adjusted accordingly, with Earth's representatives receiving odds so long that several species placed small wagers on them purely for entertainment value. The tournament would begin at dawn, and the aliens were confident that the humans would provide nothing more than a brief distraction before the real competition began. They had no idea that they were about to witness something that would change their understanding of what it meant to be a predator. The transport pods descended toward Arcturus 7's surface like falling stars, each carrying its deadly cargo to different regions of the hostile moon. The alien observers watched from the safety of the orbital station, their screens showing multiple feeds from each competitor's area. The excitement was palpable as the greatest predators in the galaxy prepared to prove their superiority. The Vorthok Crystal Warrior landed first, its pod shattering against the rocky ground like an egg releasing a nightmare. The creature emerged, without hesitation, its crystalline form reflecting the moon's pale light. Within minutes, it had engaged the local wildlife, its razor-sharp limbs slicing through a pack of 6-legged predators that had immediately challenged its presence. The creatures, each the size of a small car, fell in seconds. The alien observers cheered as the Crystal Warrior claimed its first kills. The Deltan, psychic predator's arrival was more subtle, but equally devastating. The creature's pod settled near a toxic swamp, and the predator emerged into the methane-rich atmosphere like a living nightmare. The local wildlife, drawn by curiosity to investigate the new arrival, suddenly found their minds filled with paralyzing terror. A massive serpentine creature that had ruled the swamp for decades found itself frozen in place as the psychic predator approached. The kill was swift and brutal, demonstrating the awesome power of mental domination. The Scrix hive mind assassins coordinated their assault with mechanical precision. Their pods had landed in a triangular formation, and the creatures immediately began working together to establish territory. They moved like a single organism, their actions perfectly synchronized. When a pack of local predators attempted to challenge them, the assassins responded with lethal efficiency. Each creature knew exactly where the others would be, creating a web of death that no enemy could escape. The other alien hunters proved equally impressive. The Gornax tunneler disappeared underground within minutes of landing, then emerged behind a massive horned beast, killing it before it could react. The ethereal storm creature phased through solid matter to strike at prey that thought they were safe behind rock formations. The Verdian plant predator began immediately reshaping the local ecosystem, turning the very ground into a weapon. The alien observers were pleased. The competition was proceeding exactly as expected, with their superior hunters demonstrating why they were the apex predators of their respective worlds. The betting pools grew larger as victories mounted, and the commentary became increasingly enthusiastic. Then they turned their attention to the human feeds. Tom had landed in a region of crystalline forests where the trees themselves were weapons. The razor-sharp branches could slice through metal, and the ground was littered with the bones of creatures that had tried to navigate the deadly maze. The alien observers expected to see the humans' quick demise, but instead they watched something unexpected. Tom didn't try to fight the environment. Instead, he studied it. He spent precious time examining the crystal formations, testing the wind patterns, and observing how the local wildlife moved through the deadly forest. When he finally began to move, he did so with careful deliberation, using the crystal tree's own geometry to create safe paths. He crafted simple tools from fallen branches, creating hooks and levers that allowed him to manipulate the environment safely. Within hours, Tom had not only survived, but had begun to thrive. He used the crystal forest's natural acoustics to track prey, set up simple but effective traps using the razor-sharp branches, and even managed to kill a small predator by using the environment itself as a weapon. The alien observers watched in growing confusion as the primitive human turned the deadly forest into an advantage. Lisa's landing zone was equally challenging, a region of boiling mud pools and toxic gas vents where the very air could kill. The aliens expected her to succumb quickly to the hostile environment, but instead she demonstrated remarkable adaptability. She quickly identified which areas were safe, used her clothing to create basic breathing filters, and found sources of clean water in the most unlikely places. Like Tom, Lisa didn't try to dominate the environment through force. Instead, she learned to work with it. She used the toxic gases as cover, the mud pools as traps, and the unstable ground as an early warning system. When local predators approached, she didn't try to fight them directly. Instead, she used the environment's own dangers against them, leading them into gas vents or unstable ground that did the killing for her. The alien observers began to murmur among themselves. These humans weren't fighting like proper predators. They were using tactics that seemed almost cowardly, yet they were effective. The aliens had brought creatures designed to kill through superior strength, speed, or special abilities, but the humans were winning through intelligence and adaptability. But it was the honey badger that truly baffled the observers. David had landed with his small companion in what appeared to be the most dangerous region of all, a toxic wasteland where even the Vorthic crystal warrior would have struggled to survive. The ground was covered in acidic pools, poisonous plants grew everywhere, and the local wildlife consisted of creatures that had evolved to be living weapons. The alien observers expected the small earth creature to die within minutes. Instead, they watched in growing amazement as the honey badger simply ignored every danger. When a plant shot poisonous spines at it, the honey badger shrugged off the poison and ate the plant. When a snake-like creature tried to bite it, the honey badger grabbed the snake and killed it with casual brutality. When acidic pools blocked its path, the honey badger simply walked through them, its thick hide protecting it from damage that would have killed most creatures. David followed, at a safe distance, watching his companion with calm confidence. He seemed utterly unconcerned by the dangers around them, as if he had expected this behavior from the honey badger. When alien observers tried to contact him through the communication system, asking if he was concerned for his creature's safety, David simply smiled and said, "You haven't met many honey badgers, have you?" By the end of the first day, the alien observers were confused and somewhat disturbed. Their mighty hunters had performed exactly as expected, racking up impressive kill counts and demonstrating their superior abilities. But the humans had survived through tactics that seemed impossible, and their small companion had treated the moon's deadly environment as if it were a minor inconvenience. the Vorthok Crystal Warrior had killed 15 local predators and established dominance over a large territory. The Deltan Psychic Predator had paralyzed dozens of creatures and fed at its leisure. The Skrix assassins had worked together to clear an entire valley of threats, but Tom had learned to navigate the Crystal Forest better than creatures that had lived there for millennia. Lisa had turned a toxic wasteland into a survival paradise, and the honey badger had killed 3 local predators while David took notes and seemed utterly relaxed about the whole situation. The alien observers told themselves that the first day was just a fluke. Surely the humans would fail as the competition became more intense. They had no idea that they were witnessing something that would shake their understanding of what it meant to be a predator. The honey badger finished its meal and looked around for something else to kill while David prepared for what he knew would be an interesting week. By the third day, the alien observers were no longer laughing. The orbital station buzzed with concerned whispers as the competition feeds showed something none of them had expected. The mighty hunters of the galaxy were beginning to struggle, while the humans continued to adapt and thrive in ways that defied all logical explanation. The Vorthok Crystal Warrior, despite its early successes, had encountered problems it couldn't simply cut through. The moon's ecosystem was more complex than anyone had anticipated, with hidden dangers that emerged only after days of disturbance. The Crystal Warrior had unknowingly wandered into a region where the ground itself was unstable, honeycombed with tunnels created by burrowing creatures. When the tunnels collapsed, the mighty predator found itself trapped in a pit filled with acidic water that began to eat away at its crystalline structure. The alien observers watched in shocked silence as their apex predator struggled to escape the trap. The Crystal Warrior's strength, so devastating against flesh and bone, was useless against the geological forces of the moon. Its razor-sharp limbs, designed for killing, couldn't find purchase on the smooth, acid-etched walls. For the first time in its existence, the creature that had dominated entire worlds was helpless. The Deltan Psychic Predator faced a different but equally serious problem. Its mental powers, so effective against individual creatures, proved useless against the moon's ecosystem as a whole. The predator had been feeding on the local wildlife for days, using its psychic abilities to paralyze prey and dominate territory. But it had failed to understand that the creatures it was killing were part of a delicate balance that had taken millennia to establish. The death of key predators had triggered a cascade effect. Smaller creatures, no longer held in check by their natural enemies, began to multiply rapidly. The psychic predator found itself surrounded by thousands of tiny, aggressive creatures that swarmed like insects. Its mental powers could affect individual minds, but there were too many targets, and the smaller creatures seemed to have some natural resistance to psychic manipulation. The Skrix hive mind assassins, despite their perfect coordination, discovered that their greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Their mental link that made them so effective also made them vulnerable to the moon's psychic predators. A creature that had evolved to feed on mental energy attacked their network, disrupting their coordination and leaving them confused and scattered. For the first time in their species' history, the assassins were forced to act as individuals, rather than as a perfect collective. Other alien hunters faced similar unexpected challenges. The Gornax tunneler became lost in the moon's underground maze, its ability to tunnel through rock useless when it couldn't find its way back to the surface. The ethereal storm creature found that the moon's atmosphere interfered with its ability to phase through matter, leaving it partially solid and vulnerable to physical attacks. The Verdium plant predator discovered that the moon's ecosystem was more aggressive than its own, with native plants that actively fought back against attempts to control them. The alien observers watched their champions struggle with growing alarm. These were supposed to be the greatest predators in the galaxy, creatures that had conquered entire worlds and eliminated all competition. Yet here they were, being outmaneuvered by an environment that seemed to have defenses against every type of attack. Meanwhile, the humans continued to surprise everyone. Tom had not only mastered the Crystal Forest, but had begun to use it as a base of operations. He had learned to read the subtle signs that indicated which areas were safe and which were dangerous. More importantly, he had discovered that the crystal formations could be used to create sophisticated traps and weapons. He had carved out a series of interconnected safe zones using the forest's own geometry to create corridors that funneled prey into killing zones. When a massive predator that had been terrorizing the forest for years entered his territory, Tom didn't try to fight it directly. Instead, he used a series of carefully placed sounds and movements to lead the creature through a maze of crystal spikes. The predator, following what it thought was easy prey, impaled itself on the very environment it had once ruled. Lisa had transformed her toxic wasteland into a survival paradise. She had learned to identify which plants were merely poisonous and which were deadly, using the less dangerous ones as medicine and the more dangerous ones as weapons. She had discovered natural antidotes growing in the same areas as the poisons, and had even learned to neutralize some of the toxic gases by using chemical reactions between different environmental hazards. When a pack of acid-spitting creatures attacked her shelter, Lisa didn't flee or fight. Instead, she used her knowledge of the local chemistry to create a reaction that turned the creature's own acid against them. The predators melted in their own weapons, leaving Lisa unharmed and with a new supply of useful materials. But it was the honey badger that truly amazed the observers. The small creature had spent 3 days systematically hunting down and killing every dangerous predator in its territory. It had taken on creatures 10 times its size and won every encounter through sheer tenacity and fearlessness. When poisonous snakes struck at it, the honey badger simply ignored the poison and ate the snakes. When large predators tried to intimidate it, the honey badger attacked with such ferocity that the larger creatures fled in terror. The alien observers had initially assumed that the honey badger's survival was due to luck or environmental factors. But as they watched day after day, they realized that the creature wasn't just surviving, it was actively seeking out the most dangerous predators on the moon and killing them for no apparent reason other than the fact that they were in its way. David continued to follow his companion at a safe distance, taking notes and seeming remarkably calm about the whole situation. When the orbital station's communication system finally managed to reach him, the operators bombarded him with questions about how his creature was surviving encounters that should have been fatal. David's response was simple and disturbing: honey badgers don't care about whether something should be able to kill them. They just care about whether it's between them and whatever they want. The alien observers began to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented. The humans weren't just surviving through luck or accident. They were using intelligence, adaptability, and a complete refusal to give up to turn every disadvantage into an advantage. The honey badger, meanwhile, seemed to view the moon's deadliest predators as minor annoyances to be eliminated. By the end of the 3rd day, the scoreboard showed something that no one had expected. The mighty alien hunters, despite their early leads, were struggling to maintain their positions. Several had fallen behind in points as they dealt with unexpected challenges. The humans, who had started with the lowest scores, were climbing steadily up the rankings. The honey badger had achieved something that shocked even the tournament's AI coordinator. It had killed more predators than any other competitor, not through superior strength or special abilities, but through sheer determination and an apparent inability to understand. When it was supposed to be afraid, the alien observers fell silent. As they watched their understanding of predation and survival crumble, they had brought creatures designed to kill through overwhelming force, but the humans were winning through intelligence and adaptability. They had assumed that size and strength determined survival, but the honey badger was proving that attitude and tenacity could overcome any physical disadvantage. As the 4th day dawned, the aliens began to realize that they might have seriously underestimated what Earth considered its hunters. The question was no longer whether the humans would survive, but whether the alien hunters would be able to maintain their dignity in the face of such unexpected competition. The 4th day marked a turning point that would be remembered throughout galactic history. The alien observers, who had begun the tournament with confident mockery, now watched their screens in stunned silence as the impossible continued to unfold before their eyes. The humans were not just surviving, they were dominating. And their methods were so alien to galactic, thinking that entire species were questioning their fundamental understanding of what it meant to be a predator. The honey badger had become the tournament's most terrifying competitor, and it seemed completely unaware of this fact. The small creature had spent the morning systematically hunting down the moon's apex predators, treating each encounter as if it were a minor inconvenience rather than a battle for survival. When it encountered a massive crystalline spider that had been terrorizing the region for decades, the honey badger simply walked up to it and began attacking its legs with methodical precision. The alien observers watched in horrified fascination as the spider, which stood 15 feet tall and possessed venom that could kill most creatures in seconds, found itself completely unable to deal with an opponent that simply refused to acknowledge the danger. The honey badger ignored the venom, shrugged off the spider's attempts to pierce its hide, and continued its relentless assault until the massive predator collapsed. Then, as if nothing significant had happened, the honey badger began eating its kill while David took notes nearby. The Vorthak delegation had fallen silent, their crystalline forms dim with confusion and something that might have been fear. Their crystal warrior, trapped in the acid pit since the previous day, had finally managed to escape but was severely damaged. The acidic water had eaten away at its structure, leaving it weakened and vulnerable. For the first time in its existence, the creature that had conquered worlds was limping and seeking shelter rather than hunting. Ambassador Korth's voice, when he finally spoke, carried none of its earlier arrogance. "How is this possible?" he asked, his words causing harmonic resonances throughout the chamber. "That creature weighs perhaps 30 pounds. Our warrior masses 2 tons and is composed of the hardest crystal in the galaxy. How can it be outperforming our greatest predator?" The Dalton representative's psychic voice was equally shaken. The psychic predator, overwhelmed by the swarm of smaller creatures, had been forced to retreat to a cave where it now huddled in the dark, its mental powers useless against enemies too numerous and too simple to be effectively controlled. "We brought a creature that can paralyze the minds of entire armies," the Dalton projected. "Yet it hides in fear while the Earth creature kills, without hesitation." The Skrix had perhaps the most disturbing revelation of all. Their hive-mind assassins, scattered by the psychic attack, had begun to recover their coordination. But when they encountered the honey badger's territory, they made a decision that shocked their observers. They retreated. The collective consciousness that had never known fear had assessed the small Earth creature and decided that it was not worth the risk of engagement. The buzzing of the Skrix contained notes of confusion and respect as they spoke. "The small predator does not hunt for food or territory. It kills because obstacles exist. Our collective consciousness cannot comprehend this motivation. It is ... pure." Tom and Lisa continued to excel in their own ways, but it was their approach to the environment that truly impressed the alien observers. They had turned survival into an art form, using intelligence and adaptability to overcome challenges that would have destroyed conventional predators. Tom had begun actively hunting the moon's most dangerous creatures, using the crystal forest's own geometry to create weapons and traps that were more effective than any technology. When he encountered a pack of acid-spitting creatures that had been driven from their territory by the honey badger, Tom didn't retreat or try to fight them directly. Instead, he used the crystal formations to create a series of mirrors that reflected the creature's acid back at them. The predators, faced with their own weapons turned against them, fled in terror from the human who had used nothing but intelligence and environmental awareness to defeat them. Lisa had achieved something even more remarkable. She had learned to communicate with some of the moon's less aggressive creatures, using body language and environmental cues to establish a form of cooperation. The toxic swamp creatures, recognizing that she posed no threat to their territory, had begun to actively help her by warning her of approaching dangers and guiding her to safe areas. The alien observers watched in amazement as Lisa walked through regions that should have been instantly fatal, protected by creatures that had never shown such behavior toward any other predator. She had achieved something that their advanced technology and superior evolution had failed to accomplish. She had made allies of the environment itself, but it was the honey badger that continued to dominate the competition in ways that defied explanation. The creature had begun actively seeking out the alien hunters themselves, treating them as just another obstacle to be removed. When it encountered the damaged Vorthic crystal warrior, the honey badger attacked without hesitation. The alien observers watched in stunned silence as their apex predator, a creature that had conquered entire worlds, found itself in a running battle with a 30-pound earth animal. The crystal warrior's razor-sharp limbs, so effective against flesh and bone, couldn't find purchase on the honey badger's tough hide. The creature's superior size and strength meant nothing against an opponent that simply refused to acknowledge the possibility of defeat. The battle ended with the crystal warrior retreating, its damaged structure unable to withstand the honey badger's relentless assault. For the first time in galactic history, a Vorthic predator had been defeated by a creature that weighed less than its smallest limb. The Deltan psychic predator fared no better. When the honey badger wandered into its territory, the creature attempted to paralyze it with mental attacks that had proven effective against every other species in the galaxy. The honey badger simply ignored the psychic assault and continued its approach. The psychic predator's terror was so profound that it broadcast its fear to every psychic sensitive being in the system before fleeing into the deepest cave it could find. The Scrix assassins, upon encountering the honey badger's scent trail, made an immediate collective decision to avoid the area entirely. Their perfect coordination, so effective against conventional enemies, was useless against an opponent that couldn't be reasoned with, intimidated, or predicted. David, following his companion's trail of destruction, found himself being contacted by increasingly desperate alien observers. They wanted to know how the honey badger was achieving the impossible, how it was surviving attacks that should have killed it instantly, and most importantly, how it was defeating creatures that represented the pinnacle of evolution on dozens of worlds. David's response was simple and terrifying in its implications. Honey badgers don't have the concept of giving up. They don't understand that something might be too dangerous to fight. They see a problem, and they solve it by removing the problem. It doesn't matter if the problem is bigger, stronger, or more dangerous than they are. They just don't care. The alien observers began to understand that they were witnessing something that challenged their fundamental understanding of survival and predation. They had brought creatures designed to kill through superior evolution, advanced abilities, and overwhelming force. But the humans had brought something else entirely: pure, implacable determination backed by intelligence and adaptability. As the fifth day dawned, the scoreboard showed a reality that no one had imagined possible. The honey badger led the competition by a massive margin, having killed more predators than any other competitor. Tom and Lisa ranked second and third respectively, their survival and hunting skills having overcome every challenge the moon could present. The mighty alien hunters, the creatures that had been expected to dominate, were struggling to maintain positions in the bottom half of the rankings. The aliens were beginning to realize that they had made a fundamental error in their assessment of Earth's hunters. The question was no longer who would win the competition, but what the implications of this victory would mean for their understanding of humanity and the creatures of Earth. The seventh and final day of the tournament arrived with an atmosphere of tense anticipation aboard the orbital station. The alien observers, who had begun the competition with confident mockery, now watched their screens with a mixture of fascination and growing dread. The impossible had become inevitable, and the implications were staggering. The honey badger had spent the morning eliminating the last of the moon's apex predators with the same casual efficiency it had shown throughout the week. When it encountered a massive armored creature that had ruled the volcanic regions for centuries, the honey badger simply found a gap in its armor and began systematically dismantling it. The creature, which had never known defeat, died with what could only be described as bewilderment. The alien observers watched in stunned silence as their understanding of predation crumbled. This small Earth creature wasn't just surviving, it was reshaping the entire ecosystem of Arcturus. 7 through sheer force of will and an apparent inability to comprehend. The concept of backing down. Tom had established himself as the master of the crystal forest, using the environment's own deadly beauty to create hunting grounds that were more effective than any technology. His final hunt involved a creature that had been stalking him for days, a massive predator that could phase through crystal and strike from unexpected angles. Tom didn't try to fight it conventionally. Instead, he used the forest's natural acoustics to predict its movements and set up a trap that used the creature's own phasing ability against it. The predator materialized inside a cluster of crystal spikes, killing itself instantly. Lisa had achieved something that the alien observers were still struggling to comprehend. She had formed a symbiotic relationship with the toxic swamp ecosystem, becoming part of the environment rather than fighting against it. Her final demonstration involved walking through a region so poisonous that it would have killed most creatures in seconds, protected by her understanding of the local chemistry and her alliance with the native wildlife. The alien hunters, meanwhile, had become shadows of their former selves. The Vorthak Crystal Warrior, its structure compromised by acid damage and repeated encounters with the honey badger, had retreated to a cave where it remained hidden. The Deltan psychic predator had suffered a complete mental breakdown, its psychic screams echoing through the minds of every sensitive being in the system. The Skrix assassins had abandoned their hunting entirely, spending their time in desperate attempts to avoid the honey badger's territory. As the final hours of the competition approached, the tournament's AI coordinator made an unprecedented announcement. The honey badger had achieved something that had never been recorded in galactic history. It had killed or driven off every apex predator on Arcturus 7, the moon's ecosystem, which had been shaped by millions of years of evolution and countless deadly creatures had been completely restructured by a single 30-pound animal in less than a week. The scoreboard showed a reality that no one had imagined possible. The honey badger had accumulated more points than the next 5 competitors combined. Tom and Lisa held second and third place respectively, their scores higher than any alien hunter had ever achieved in similar competitions. The mighty predators that had been expected to dominate were scattered throughout the bottom half of the rankings, their legendary abilities proven inadequate against Earth's representatives. The alien delegation sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in. They had brought the greatest predators from across the galaxy, creatures that had conquered entire worlds and eliminated all competition. Yet they had been completely outclassed by humans, and their small companion, Ambassador Korth of the Vorthak, was the first to speak, his crystalline voice carrying notes of something that might have been respect. "We must know," he said, his words resonating through the chamber. "This creature, this honey badger, it is Earth's greatest predator." David, who had been calmly taking notes throughout the competition, looked up from his observations with a slight smile. "Greatest predator? Oh no, not at all. The honey badger is actually considered a nuisance species on Earth. They're tough and stubborn, but they're not even close to being our most dangerous predators." The chamber fell silent. The implications of David's words were staggering. If the honey badger, which had dominated the competition and restructured an entire ecosystem, was nearly a nuisance species, what did that say about Earth's actual apex predators? The Deltan representative's psychic voice was barely a whisper. "Then why did you bring it to compete against our greatest hunters?" David's smile widened slightly. "Because we wanted to make a point about underestimating Earth's creatures. The honey badger is small, looks harmless, and most people don't take it seriously. We thought it would be interesting to see how it performed against predators that were supposedly superior." The Skrix collective consciousness buzzed with confusion and something that might have been fear. "If this is not your greatest predator, then what is?" David considered the question carefully. "Well, that depends on how you define predator. If you're talking about raw killing power, we have creatures like polar bears, great white sharks, and saltwater crocodiles. If you're talking about pack hunters, we have wolves, lions, and orcas. If you're talking about perfect killing machines, we have creatures like the mantis shrimp and the cone snail. The alien observers listened with growing alarm as David casually described creatures that sounded impossibly dangerous. Each species he mentioned seemed to possess abilities that would make them formidable opponents for their own apex predators. But, David continued, if you're talking about the most dangerous predator on Earth, that would be humanity itself. The chamber erupted in confused voices and competing translations. The aliens had assumed that humans were the intelligent species, while the honey badger was the predator. The idea that the humans themselves were predators was almost incomprehensible. David waited for the noise to die down before continuing. Humans are persistence hunters. We don't have the speed of a cheetah or the strength of a bear, but we have something else. We never give up. We can track prey for days, weeks, or even months. We can adapt to any environment, use any tool, and overcome any obstacle. We're not the fastest or the strongest, but we're the most persistent. The alien observers were beginning to understand something that chilled them to their cores. The humans hadn't just brought a small predator to the competition, they had brought themselves. Tom and Lisa had demonstrated the same qualities that made the honey badger so effective: intelligence, adaptability, and a complete refusal to accept defeat. The tournament coordinator's AI voice cut through the stunned silence. The competition is now concluded. The winners are, first place, the honey badger of Earth; second place, Tom of Earth; third place, Lisa of Earth. The awards ceremony that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. The alien observers, who had planned to use the tournament to establish a hierarchy of predatory species, found themselves confronting a reality they had never imagined. The creatures they had dismissed as weak and primitive had not just won, they had dominated so completely that the competition had ceased to be meaningful. As the ceremony concluded and the delegations prepared to return to their respective worlds, the aliens made a discovery that would reshape galactic politics. The tournament had originally been conceived as a way to assess the military potential of various species, with the strongest predators indicating the most dangerous civilizations. The assumption had been that Earth, with its small predators, and apparently weak humans, would be easy to conquer if the need arose. That assumption was now revealed to be catastrophically wrong. If Earth's nuisance species could dominate the galaxy's greatest predators, and if humans themselves were the planet's apex predators, then Earth represented a threat that no one had anticipated. The Galactic Council, in an emergency session that lasted for days, reached a unanimous decision. Earth was to be classified as a Class X civilization, the highest threat level in galactic law. No military action was to be taken against the planet, no territorial claims were to be made, and all contact was to be conducted with extreme caution and respect. The honey badger, completely oblivious to the political implications of its actions, had finished its meal and was now grooming itself with typical indifference. David packed up his notes and prepared for the journey home, satisfied that the point had been made. As the Earth delegation prepared to leave, Ambassador Korth approached David with a question that had been troubling him. If your species is so dangerous, why do you live in peace with creatures like the honey badger? David's answer would be, quoted in galactic history texts for generations to come, because we understand that the most dangerous predator is one that chooses when to hunt. The honey badger kills because it has to. Humans kill because we choose to. The difference is that we can also choose not to. The alien observers watched the Earth delegation depart with a mixture of relief and newfound respect. They had learned something that would change their understanding of predation, survival, and the nature of intelligence itself. The galaxy was a much more dangerous place than they had imagined, and the greatest danger came from a small blue planet whose inhabitants had just demonstrated that they were not to be underestimated. The honey badger, for its part, had already forgotten about the competition and was looking forward to whatever challenges awaited it back on Earth. After all, it had things to do, and nothing was going to stop it from doing them.